In continuation to the endocrine system, I talked about the hormones that can enter the cells. Now, there are hormones that do not enter the cells. So, it could be the case that the hormones are too large or too polar to cross the plasma membrane of their target cells. So, that includes peptides and glycoprotein hormones as well as catecholamine hormones such as epinephrine and norepinephrine. So these hormones, they bind to the receptor proteins that are located onto the surface of the cells or the target cells. So these hormones, they do not enter the cells to exert their effect as in the case of the lipophilic hormones. So the interaction between the hormone and its receptor activates a mechanism in the plasma membrane that increase the concentration of the secondary messenger within the target cell cytoplasm. So once the hormone binds to a receptor, activates a secondary messenger, then it dissociates from the receptor and it may travel in the blood to another target cell, which could be somewhere else in the body. And eventually, when the effect is being exerted, these hormones are degraded by the enzymes, which are majorly present in the liver. And these enzymes, they are converted to inactive derivatives. So let's see an example here. So in one of the examples here, this epinephrine, it binds to beta adrenergic receptors. Now this beta adrenergic receptor mediated by G protein activates the adrenalyl cyclase, and this adrenalyl cyclase mediates the conversion of ATP to cyclic AMP. Now this cyclic AMP activates the protein kinase A, which is the enzyme which is already present in the cytoplasm in the inactive form. Now this protein kinase A phosphorylates and thereby activates phosphorylase. So this phosphorylase catalyzes the conversion of glycogen to glucose. So in a way, the glycogen which is stored inside the cell is now converted into the glucose on the action of the availability of epinephrine. This cyclic AMP here generated via the response of binding of epinephrine to the protein receptor acts as a secondary messenger. Now let's see another example here. So epinephrine, it could bind to the beta adrenergic receptors. So these beta adrenergic receptors which are present onto the cell surface, they are mediating or they activate the G protein receptor which could bind to phospholipase C. Now this phospholipase C converts the membrane phospholipids into inositol phosphate triphosphate, or in short we call it IP3. Now this IP3 binds to the, or you can say this IP3 diffuses or moves around the cytoplasm and eventually binds to the receptors which are present onto the endoplasmic reticulum. So this binding of IP3 to the receptor stimulates the endoplasmic reticulum and releases the calcium. Now this calcium released into the cytoplasm is regulated by the protein calmodulin. This calmodulin calcium complex activates another intracellular proteins, thereby producing the effect of the hormone. Okay, so this is a pictorial or a photograph of a posterior pituitary gland. So this pituitary gland is attached via stalk to the hypothalamus of the brain. So the anterior part of the pituitary is a glandular one, and the posterior, which is just behind of this, is a fibrous part. So let's see the effect of antidiuretic hormone, or in short, this is called as ADH. So let's say the body is having dehydration. So when there is a condition of dehydration, there is increase in the osmotic concentration in the blood. Now this will be activating the osmoreceptors, which are present in the blood vessels. Now this osmoreceptors, they will they will actually stimulate the secretion of ADH by the hypothalamus. Now this ADH, it acts onto the kidney and it acts onto the blood vessels. So in kidney, it activates the water reabsorption. In a way, it reduces the urine formation. So this water retention or reduced urine formation leads to increase in the water. So this more and more water is being retained. Now this increased retention in water acts as a negative feedback. So this kind of leads to decrease in the dehydration, or in a way there will be rehydration in the body. In another case where there is vasoconstriction, the lumen of the blood vessels is decreased. Now the blood pressure will increase. So this blood pressure, which was decreased due to dehydration, here you can see this is lower blood pressure because of the lower blood volume. Now the vasoconstriction or the blood vessel lumen is shorter, so this will increase. So there is again a negative feedback. So in case of lower blood pressure, due to low blood volume, now we'll have the increase in the blood pressure. Okay, so these are the couple of hormones which are released by the anterior pituitary. Here we have this thyroid stimulating hormone which acts on the thyroid. Then we have adrenocorticotropic hormone which acts on the adrenal gland. Then we have growth hormone which acts on the bone and muscles. Gonadotropic hormone, where we have follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone. So this acts on the testes and the ovaries. Then we have prolactin which acts on the mammary glands, and we have this melanocyte stimulating hormone which acts on the melanocytes in amphibians. The posterior part secretes only two hormones majorly, oxytocin and the antidiuretic hormone. So ADH, it kinds of affects the kidney tubules, and the oxytocin at the muscles of the uterus. So let's talk about a couple of hormones here. So one of the major hormones is the growth hormone. So now because of the excess release or less release of the growth hormone, there are a couple of conditions which could occur in the normal being. So gigantism, it is one of the conditions which is caused by the excessive secretion of growth hormone. It is by the anterior pituitary gland in a growing child. So this excess growth hormone stimulates protein synthesis and growth of muscles and the connective tissues. It also indirectly promotes the elongation of bones by stimulating cell division in the cartilaginous epiphyseal growth plate of bones. So in a way, the child develops into a adult which is having much more height as compared to the average normal human beings. And when the person's skeletal growth plate have converted from cartilage into bone, these growth hormone can no longer cause an increase in the height. So now, because of the presence of the excess growth hormone in adults, it produces soft bone and tissues, and that could be deformed. This particular condition is called acromegaly. So it's a kind of giant condition, the excess growth which leads to increase in the hands or the limbs, and they are having soft bone and tissues. So they are kind of deformation in the overall body structure. Now there is another condition. So in these two conditions, gigantism and the acromegaly, there is excess of growth hormone. Now there is another condition where the growth hormone is in lower amounts as required. So when the small amount of growth hormone is secreted, it leads to dwarfism. So that is a condition where the child fails to achieve normal growth. So look at this negative feedback system. So hypothalamus, it releases a couple of hormones like the TRH, CRH, and the GnRH, or the gonadotropin releasing hormone. So these hormones, they control the anterior pituitary and stimulates the secretion of tropic hormones such as thyroid stimulating hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, and the luteinizing hormone. So these hormones, they target glands are thyroid, adrenal cortex, and the cortex. These now they're gonna release their own hormones, and now these hormones, they'll have the negative feedback. Either they'll inhibit anterior pituitary so that it doesn't release the stimulating hormones, or these hormones can have direct effect on the hypothalamus. So in the situations where the amount of the hormone goes down in the body, then there's a message goes to the hypothalamus to increase the level of that particular hormone. However, when the optimum amount of that particular hormone is reached, it gonna have a negative effect onto the anterior pituitary or onto the hypothalamus, or maybe both, so that the amount of stimulation is being removed and the hormone which is being secreted is reduced. So in a way, this keeps a check on the level of hormone that needs to be secreted. Okay, so let's see an example of this negative feedback system. So let's say, for example, hypothalamus secretes a thyrotropin releasing hormone, or TRH. This TRH stimulates the anterior pituitary, and pituitary releases thyroid stimulating hormone, or simply TSH. Now this TSH targets the thyroid gland and controls or stimulates it to secrete thyroxine. Now this thyroxine, when it reaches the optimum level, it is going to stimulate at 2 points. This thyroxine will give a negative feedback inhibition to the anterior pituitary, or it may give the negative feedback to the hypothalamus. So in a situation where optimum amount of thyroxine is already available, so it will inhibit the anterior pituitary, hypothalamus, or both, so that no more stimulation is being sent, so that the thyroxine levels are optimally maintained. So, okay, so this is an image of a person suffering with the goiter. So this is a case where there is lack of iodine in the diet. Now this thyroxine secretion is low because of the less availability of iodine. So now, since thyroxine secretion is low, TSH, remember from the previous slide, TSH stimulates the thyroid gland to secrete thyroxine. So when the thyroxine level is low, TSH will keep on stimulating the thyroid gland. So if it will keep on stimulating, it means that stimulus will lead to the excess growth of the thyroid gland. Now there are two things. Either iodine is being given. So if the appropriate amount of iodine is available, then the small amount of stimulus of the thyroid gland is good enough to synthesize the appropriate or the optimum level of thyroxine. Now, if the level of iodine is low and the stimulus is high, it will force the thyroid gland to increase the synthesis of thyroxine. Now, since the iodine availability is poor, the thyroxine gland, this thyroxine synthesis will also be less, and that stimulus will going to affect the thyroid gland and will lead to the enlargement of the thyroid gland. And now this enlargement will produce a ring-like structure in the neck due to excess growth of the thyroid, which is called as the goiter. So thyroxine also triggers metamorphosis in amphibians. So in tadpoles, which are in the pre-metamorphosis stage, there the hypothalamus releases TRH, thyrotropin releasing hormone. Now this TRH stimulates the TSH and ultimately leads to the release of thyroxine. So as the TRH level increases, the more and more stimulus is being generated, and that will lead to the secretion of more and more thyroxine. So this thyroxine will stimulate initially the formation of hind limbs, and when the thyroxine level increases to the maximum, let's say at this particular day 0, then the development of forelimb will also start. So in a way, from the tadpole to the adult frog, this metamorphosis takes place in the amphibians due to the stimulation by the thyroxine. So there's a regulation of blood calcium level by the parathyroids. So let's imagine there's a situation where low blood calcium is there. So this low blood calcium will stimulate the parathyroid gland. This parathyroid glands, they will secrete the parathyroid hormone. Now this parathyroid hormone will affect 3 different sites. So what are the 3 different sites is? It will affect the intestine. The digestive system will be affected. So in the small intestine, it will lead to the increased absorption of calcium. Another one will be at the kidneys. So in the kidneys, there will be increased reabsorption of calcium and excretion of phosphate. So in a way, at these 2 different sites, there will be more and more calcium absorption. The third one will be at the bones. So in the bones, this calcium phosphate will dissolve the crystals and leads to the release of calcium. So this is one of the reasons that those people who are having lower level of calcium, and if this condition is prolonged for years, they start feeling pain in their bigger joints. Let's say, for example, back, shoulders, neck, and sometimes in elbows and knees as well. This is because of the dissolution of the calcium from the bones, which is present in the form of calcium phosphate. So when there is dissolution of calcium from the bones, reabsorption in the kidneys or reabsorption into the intestine, it will lead to the increase in the blood calcium. When the desired level of blood calcium is increased, it is going to have a negative feedback. That negative feedback will lead to the decrease in the level of parathyroid hormone. So that decrease in parathyroid hormone, now it will lead to decrease in the absorption of calcium at the intestine, decreased reabsorption of calcium in the kidneys, and there is decrease in the calcium release from the bones. So those people who are having lower calcium, they are usually advised either to take dietary calcium or they are prescribed calcium from outside. And along with the calcium absorption vitamins, they are also being given, like vitamin D3, or the body will start dissolving from the bones. They'll start feeling pain in their bones. Okay, so let's have a look at the adrenal gland. So the adrenal gland is present onto the upper part of the kidneys. So we can have 2 adrenal glands. The right adrenal gland over the right kidneys and the left just above the left kidney. So this adrenal gland, if we cut open this, we see we have adrenal cortex and the inner medulla. So this adrenal cortex steroid produces steroid hormones that influence blood glucose, and the inner medulla produces the epinephrine and the norepinephrine. Okay, so let's imagine a situation that after a meal there is increase in the blood glucose level. Now this will stimulate the islet of Langerhans in the pancreas. Now it will have two effects. So effect number one will be increased secretion of insulin. So this increased secretion of insulin will take care of the absorption of glucose, and there will be decreased secretion of glucagon. So this decreased secretion of glucagon, it's glucagon kind of converts glycogen into glucose. So we don't need any more conversion. So there will be lesser amount of glucagon. So these combined effect of insulin and glucagon leads to the movement of glucose from blood into the cells. So as the blood moves from blood into the cells, now we'll have again the blood increase after the, this will have a negative impact on the blood. So the level will go down. And again, if the person takes meal, the blood glucose will again go up. However, there is another situation that after, let's say, a person takes lunch and after that followed by dinner, so there is a gap of 6 to 7 hours. So in those 6 to 10 hours, the blood glucose level decreases. Now because of decrease, now again the pancreas, the islet of Langerhans are affected. So now there will be a reversal, that is the increased level of insulin will be going down. So earlier there was increase, now it will be decrease. There will be less level of insulin and more level of glucagon. So less level of insulin will take care of the absorption of glucose from the blood. So less amount of glucose will be absorbed from the blood, and increased amount of glucagon will take care that the glycogen which is stored in the liver will be converted to glucose. So now this conversion of glycogen into glucose, it will have a negative feedback system. So this decreased glucose level will again brought to the optimum, or there will be increase in the blood glucose level. So one can say that when the dietary or the food is taken, at that particular time there is high level of insulin in order to reduce the excess amount of glucose being absorbed into the body, and at that time the glucagon level is low. However, between the meals, or let's say during fasting, the insulin level goes down and the glucagon level goes up, so that the glycogen is converted into glucose. Okay, so let's see a little bit of function of different glands. So pituitary gland, so there are a couple of situations where hyper secretion of the growth hormone. So that leads to the gigantism in children and acromegaly in adults. Now there is a situation where there is hyposecretion of growth hormone. So in this particular case, there is pituitary dwarfism. So there is slow growth of bones. So usually the height of children is usually below 4 feet. And also if there is a hyposecretion of ADH, anti-diuretic hormone. So now it will lead to a problem which is called diabetes insipidus, or polyuria, polydipsia, or severe ionic imbalances. So these are the problems which are associated with the excess release of water from the body. Thyroid gland. So there are two issues with the thyroid gland. So either we can have hyperthyroidism or one can have hypothyroidism. So in hyperthyroidism, it is also known as the Graves' disease. It is considered as an autoimmune disorder where there is increased metabolic rate, excessive perspiration, rapid and irregular heartbeat, nervousness, and weight loss. So this condition called exophthalmos, that is the protrusion of the eyeballs caused by the edematous tissue behind the eyes. So one can see that these people who are having hypothyroidism, their eyeballs appear a little bit larger and they seems to be popping out of the eye sockets. The condition hypothyroidism, which is called as the cretinism, this is called as in the infant hypothyroidism. So it shows stunted growth, this thickened facial features, abnormal bone development, and mental retardation. So there are other situations also like myxedema, low metabolic rate, lethargy, weight gain, increase in the body fluids, goiter, abnormal growth of the thyroid glands. The most characteristic is the cretinism and the goiter here. Parathyroid also we can have hyperparathyroidism or hypoparathyroidism. In hyperparathyroidism, there is demineralization of bones. So this results in the bone deformity and easily fractures, or there may be stones in the urinary tract. In case of hypothyroidism, there is decreased plasma calcium levels, which were also called severe muscle kidney. In case of pancreas, one can have hyperinsulinemia or hypoinsulinemia. So hyperinsulinemia means that there are high conditions of hypoglycemia, which is due to lack of glucose delivery to the brain. So if there is more and more insulin available, it means the more and more glucose will be removed from the blood to the cells. So the availability of glucose in the blood will be less, and the brain will be kind of receiving less amounts of insulin. And there will be a condition called hypoglycemia. So it causes disorientation, unconsciousness, and when this is really high, it can eventually lead to death. Now, in hypoinsulinemia, we can have two types of issues. This is type 1 diabetes, which is insulin dependent, and this type 2 diabetes, which is insulin independent. So in type 1 diabetes, there's increased level of glucose level in the blood and urine. However, the diabetic person experience vascular and neural problems. Also, this poor circulation may lead to blindness, gangrene, kidney damage, and impotence. In type 2 diabetes, this is usually occurs later in the life, where the absorption of glucose or the utilization of glucose keeps on decreasing. So this can easily be circumvented by taking some medications or taking higher levels of insulin from outside. Okay, so in adrenal gland, one can have hypersecretion of corticosteroids. So there's a problem called Cushing syndrome. So that is change in carbohydrate and protein metabolism, which results in puffy appearance. In extreme cases, the faces could be moon face, or one can develop buffalo hump. In case of hypersecretion of epinephrine and norepinephrine, the person may have hypertension, hyperglycemia, nervousness, sweating, and complex exhaustion occurs. Now, these epinephrine and norepinephrine, they in general increases the body metabolism, or blood pressure and metabolism is increased in this situation, where high levels of epinephrine and norepinephrine are available. So these symptoms, hypertension, hypoglycemia, they are because of the elevated level of metabolic activity due to these hormones. Hyposecretion of glucocorticoids and mineral corticoids. The problem is called Addison's disease hypoglycemia. So there is sodium and potassium imbalance, dehydration or hypotension, and rapid weight loss. Now, death occurs with lack of treatment in case of Addison's disease. Okay, so this is all which I wanted to talk to you about this endocrine system. So thank you very much for your attention.